Good afternoon, everyone, ladies and gentlemen. This talk today has been organized as a collaboration between Art Brussels and Delfina Foundation, which is the organization that I am director of. And we've organized this talk in the context of a program that we're doing at Delfina Foundation called Collecting as Practice, which is looking at the psychology, the philosophy, and the politics of collecting. For those of you who don't know Delfina Foundation, it is a nonprofit organization that is devoted to supporting artistic practice through an integrated program of residencies and public events. Over the last 30 years, we've supported some 750 artists through residencies, many of whom have gone on to have significant success, winning Golden Lions, winning Turner Prizes, and just as a sign of that success, we have 10 artists in this year's Venice Biennial. Now, one would think that our founder would be a collector and have amazing collection based on all of these artists, but very famously, she is not a collector. Delfina, our founder, has always cherished her relationships with artists. And now at 90 years old, she has famously said two things that I think will resonate with the panel. The first one is that the art world is full of shit. The second thing is, that she says, is I collect artists, not art. And this philosophy has become the basis of our work at Delfina Foundation. Today's panel is presented as part of this thematic program, as I said to you earlier, about bringing together artists and collectors to look at urgent questions around collecting practices. Delfina Foundation is the first program, perhaps in the world, to bring together artists and collectors in residence to explore common practices and approaches. Alain Servais was one of our first, or was the first, collector in residence at Delfina Foundation, and in fact inspired the entire program. So what does a collector do in residence? Well, our other two panelists, Pedro Barbosa and Dorith Galuz, will soon find out, as they will be joining us in residence very soon at Delfina Foundation. But to give you all some sense of what that entails, the residencies are short, intense periods of engagement with our collectors and our artists. And it's punctuated by formal and informal activities, by public and private moments. And what's really important in the context is looking at their concerns and the context in which they're collecting in, and what does it mean in terms of their relationships with artists. And that's why the private aspects of the residency are very important, in a sense that the collectors are sharing a house with our resident artists. They are sharing ideas, they're sharing meals, and over chopping vegetables, over cups of tea, there's a real engagement between the artist and the collector. And what the program is trying to do is collapse that distance between the two that's often mediated by galleries, by patron groups, by art fairs, and even sometimes by foundations such as ourselves. So we're creating this unregulated space for these conversations to talk about social value and aesthetic value, not necessarily just economic value of art. So today's talk, Collecting Intimacy and the Domestic, is about these kinds of personal encounters between collectors and art and artists. And I'm really thankful to Art Brussels for offering us this opportunity to bring together three of our future and past collectors in residence to take this conversation into this particular arena with all of you, and there will be a chance for questions or a little bit of discussion at the end of the talk. Today's talk is moderated by Rose Lejeune, who is an independent curator based in London who works with both public museums and private individuals to help commission, present, and acquire artworks, with a focus specifically on context-based performative and ephemeral practices, which many of these collectors here also are very interested in. Rose is the associate curator of Collecting as Practice at Delfina Foundation, and now I'm really pleased to hand over to Rose to moderate this conversation this afternoon. Thank you all.
Thank you. So just to add a tiny bit of information to what Aaron has already said in terms of thinking about the talk today, but also the programme in general. We're going to do a series of talks over the next 3 months, both with different art fairs and also in the foundation in London. And it's really this series of conversations that kind of use the residency programme as a springboard to think about how collectors and collections are kind of a growing part of a kind of ever more present within the contemporary art landscape, not just in terms of kind of thinking about the art market, but also specifically as collections, as spaces for production and for the reception of contemporary art practices. So for this talk, we really wanted to kind of start with the observation that this shift in roles and the shift in position of the collector means that we're also now starting to talk about collecting within, not as abstracted from the kind of public art world, but also as part of it, and in that sense as something that has elements of the commissioner, elements of the curatorial within it. And so we might think about the kind of processes and the methods for collecting and see where they kind of overlap and where they change and diverge from the kind of public museum, but also when they start to kind of dovetail with artistic and curatorial kind of concerns. So it's really nice to have this group of collectors here today, who I think, as Aaron has said, are really much more, seem like the practices that you have are much more interested in ideas and artists and people, or at least as interested in those things as art objects. So it's something that has really developed for each of the separate collectors in different ways into a kind of method that allows you to engage more directly with artists, both in your home, but also out in the kind of broader world. And also, I think, through very kind of strong conceptual and research-based practices. So these kind of interests that engages with the contemporary and with what's going on out in the world and the kind of politics and urban realities that you live in, as much as it is a kind of purely formal kind of relationship. And in fact, I think both Alain and Dorith in conversations have really expressed this idea that it's not an interest in a formal set of considerations, but in a kind of, or an aesthetic, but in something that addresses the kind of world that we live in today. So what I'm hoping that we can do in that sense is think about collecting as a practice, as a way of researching those kind of contemporary urgencies, but also as in something that enacts human relationships, social interaction, and think about whether or not those observations, I guess, ring true, but also about if you can give a little bit of insight today into how you came to work in this way and what that means for you as a collector, and what those collections, maybe how those collections go out into the broader world. So I'm not going to try and introduce you all and kind of sum up your collections in a general sense, but what I thought we might do is start with you all introducing yourselves a little bit and giving some context to your collections and the way that you're working now. And then maybe we can talk through some of those kind of similarities and differences and think about the ways in which you engage with artists and practice. So I don't know if you want to start, Dorith?
We began with my husband to collect 30 years ago. At the beginning, we collected paintings, some traditional artwork, and the relationship is very important because we meet somebody, which was very important for us. The name is Ellen Flies, and she was very young. She was 21 years old, and she showed us there was an art with young artists. They are not dead, they are living now. And we discover, at this time, we discover we didn't want to collect only objects. We want to have real relationship with the artist, and it begins very important for us, this relationship. There was an accident in our life, so we stopped collecting during 10 years. And it was very interesting 10 years after to come back in the art, comment on dit, le milieu, art practice. Because 10 years after, we discover another word. It was so different, so much galleries, so much artists. it was like begin again to collect in another word. And we discussed with my husband, because we realized there are some artists, we didn't have artworks of these artists in our collection. And we discussed together what we do. We try to buy these artworks and to have a relation with this artist, or we decide to, again, support the emergent art and the emergent artist. And we decided to continue to support. We support a lot, as we can, the emergent art and the emergent artist. It's very important for us.
Can you describe how you support?
Yes. Sometimes we help young artists to produce their artworks. I need a lot help. I don't know. But
you buy their art, which is already
yes,
supporting quite a lot.
I buy. I speak a lot with them. I receive at home a lot of artists, curators, and everything, because the discussion is very important for us. I am psychoanalyst. I need to understand what is in the work, not just an object, not just. I have to. I'm interested about the sense, the profound sense of a work and of the mind of the artist.
So is that a kind of, for you, is that, how do you start that process of deciding which artists to have conversations with? Is there a research kind of process that you go through, or is it just about visiting lots of galleries? Or like, who do you talk to understand how to develop the collection?
Even when I visit a gallery and discover, and some salon where I discover young artists, or project space, and I am always looking at project space and discover young artists. Even when I go in a gallery, the gallerist in Paris knows that it's very important for me to meet the artist and to speak with. There is a gallerist here from Paris. He knows he's here, and he knows I need to meet the gallerist, the artist. Sorry. Because I have to understand, and it's important also to not to buy only a work of an artist, but to, comment on dit, suivre? To follow the work of this artist and his mind and his evolution about his work.
Thank you. And Alain, would you like to introduce yourself?
So I think if you want to know more about me, just go on Google, just Alain Servais and art, and you'll find enough that you need if you're really interested. What about my practice about art? It's really one of the most important things for me. Art is related to life. It is not just an additional luxury good. I'm pretty vocal, and everybody knows I'm pretty vocal about that. The fact that art is not just another luxury good. So it's always related to life. I like the definition of art. Art is a language, which means it's about ideas, which opens your heart, my heart, because it's emotional as well, to the other, and the other is a big O. It's anything which is not you. Also, in the way of reading the art market now, let's read it in relation to life. We are a bunch of privileged people, and to which we give some magical competences when we are just poor drug addicts. When you get into art and you get a passion for it, we are just addicted guys. we want more. We're always thinking about the next piece more than about the previous piece, so there's an evolution about it. And so outside these elements, there's also an idea of sharing. I think all of us here are sharer. I think that I still don't understand the people that just want to keep it there and don't want to lend them and put them in a safe and a lock and something. We're lending a lot of works always. I always say to the artist, I mean, I'm the custodian of your work. If you need it, I will always lend it. With the risk, because lending is always risky. And I would say that 50% of the time there is a problem with the works when you get it back. So lending is already one thing. We're really making the most we can to broadcast the work and to make it public. Another way we did, which happened by accident, is I had some friends. They bought a new house. They are French in Brussels, and when they visited the house for the first time, all the walls were empty. So I said, "Oh, it's hurting me, those empty walls." So, but they said, "We love art, but we know nothing about art." So I said, "Come home. We change the hanging every year if you want to take works." And so they still, 6 years afterwards, are hosting 22 works of the collection, which is sometimes very funny because the works are changing. So I told them that every year I may have to take them down because we change the hanging. And it's funny because some people visit my place and say, "I've seen this work at Frederick. Oh, is it his? No, it's mine." But it doesn't matter who owns it, and it's not about that element. About the relationship to the artist, I am less direct than you, Dorith. Sometimes I prefer not to meet the artist before, because I want to be, to have a distant relationship with the artwork. And I agree with you. I'm not acquiring a work. I'm acquiring an artist in that sense, like Delfina from that point of view. Even if slavery have been abolished a few years ago, but it's still so it's just an expression that we acquiring artists because Babak is just behind. He's an artist I like very much. I own some of his work, but I don't own him until the last things. But I think it's because I have a difficult relationship about the kind of the strange system that the art world is, and particularly this relationship. Everybody's friends with everyone. We're all kissing and we all love each other, which is not the case. It's not possible. We still, again, if we go back to a human grouping, we are a human grouping. So there are good guys and bad guys. There are good artists, good collectors, bad collectors. Many bad galleries. Oh no, sorry, good galleries, bad galleries. But overall, that's the thing. So I don't want to be influenced by it, but also I'm also very aware of the relationship. I am the guy that will maybe make possible to the artist to pay his rent next month. So I mean, to think that I'm going to be his friend and he's going to be speaking freely about my work, about his work, and so on, without having the intention of selling it to me, it doesn't work really that way. So I try sometimes I definitely love to meet the artist, but very often after I acquire the works, from that point of view, if you were talking to me. You talked also about commission. I never commission, and I will never commission. Why? Because for me, the most interesting is the free expression of the artist. I absolutely would never want to be involved about, I would like it 3 meters on 2. If you can make it in the blue hue, it would be perfectly fitting my thing. I would really abhor that. So, which is a disadvantage because I need to like the work somewhere to see it. I also need context. I wrote an article again, just Google Art Space Alain Servais. You'll find it, where I wrote that I found that the best art fair in the world was the Venice Biennale. And I agree, because you can buy the Venice Biennale. And it's there that the art is in the best context. I love art fairs, they love me, as you see. But for me, it's objectively the worst place to see art, not to acquire art, and not to connect about people around the art, but it's the worst place to see art. So I can go on for an hour and a half if you want, but I will pass the word to Pedro before he falls asleep.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. What's the question?
The question is, can you tell us something about your collection, how it comes about, how you think about developing it, and I guess in particular how you relate to artists or work with artists?
Well, I don't know why the collection started. It was an opportunity to buy an artwork. And then, you know, this I know is an addiction. As an addict, I think it's an addiction, yeah. As an addict, then I start, you know, buying a few pieces here and there. Everything within the same subject of geometric abstraction. Later, I moved to young artists, where, you know, then I started to knowing who the artists are. This was very much Brazil and South America. And by 2012, you know, I realized that I could be making wrong purchase. So I joined forces with an Italian-Brazilian curator, and we decided to broaden the spectrum of the collection to a borderless collection. Since then, was not a program of only buying artworks, but also commission books for artists that had at least 10 years or more of production in Brazil. We started a residency program in Sao Paulo, where we had more than 25 people. All of them were foreigners, excluding Renata Lucas, that stayed there for a while. And right after, we started a relationship with the Delfina Foundation. This is our 4th year. We wanted to send Brazilian artists abroad, but we had no expertise. So we decided to join forces with an institution that was already established. And this year, we start another program with Jimmy Durhan and Maria Teresa Alves, where we are also going to send one Brazilian there for a 3-month program in Naples and in Berlin. So it's very much it, you know. So in our residence, we don't ask anything back. The guy can go there and sleep all day long for 3 months. And if we send the guy abroad also, I don't care to the result. And that's it, to each its own. They have their lives, I have my life. All I do is helping them, I guess.
So do you think that you're, in that sense, as much of a patron as you are a collector?
No, I am what I am. I don't know. I like the guys, you know. Everything is a closed call, so there is no open call for residents. It's very personal. So if I like or I don't like. It's simple. The process is very simple. It's straightforward.
I think we have the same approach. I forgot to mention I have a residency as well. I think very quickly when you get involved with arts, you understand that the most interesting part is about sharing. Sharing experiences, sharing ideas, sharing works of art if necessary, but sharing also experiences through residencies, through opening the collection to visits. I think that's, and I very often see that in evolution of many collectors is when they start opening a space to the public, whether large or small, they kind of collect less because they have so much pleasure. And it's still a pleasure. It's like eating, you know, gummies or something like that. You know, when you have enough, you have enough of good experiences. And so they collect a little bit less. But I think you're also a big sharer. That element is important as well.
I guess one has to be. Sharing is caring.
So in that sense, when you talk about the idea that there comes a point where you've had enough I mean, does there come a point for you where you've had enough of the gummy bears? And so you really, I mean, particularly Pedro, I think you've talked a lot about the idea in particular of actually really becoming more and more interested, not only in working with artists and kind of supporting them in that way, but actually in like ephemeral practice and dance and sound art and things that really are very kind of, in that sense, beyond that idea of literally accumulating objects.
Well, I'm trying to put together, I found that there is a Brazilian lady dancing with Yvonne Rainer. So I'm trying to do something in Brazil, bring her for like seminars and talks, and even trying to have a project. More and more, I guess that I'm very much done with buying. It no longer challenges me. It's an accumulation, and since I've been hanging out with these guys, the challenge for me is to learn from them. And more, they put me to read, Foucault, Agamben, and now this is what interests me. Is no longer buying. And in the case of the ephemera and the publications and this kind of material, I'm a chemical engineer, so I never study art, so I had no clue what art is. So by having access to this material and opening this material for people that want to research, I get a lot of information. So from them, and they say, well, read this, read that, go this way, go that way. So this is what is challenging, is knowledge. It's no longer having a pile of artworks. So let me say that if I have to follow someone, this someone is a guy called Cezar.
Galleries, don't leave. We're still acquiring art. This one has done with it. We keep acquiring art.
Keep going. But do you similarly, Alain and Dorith, do you similarly find yourself increasingly drawn to not necessarily more ephemeral practice, but more challenging kind of ways of thinking about how you might own things, or thinking about how you might kind of develop?
I think, as I said, there are as many different type of collectors as different type of artists, or as even different type of humans. I'm very interested by the psychology of the collectors, because they are sometimes very complex personalities. So in my case, I really also say one of the things that art brought me is a kind of a free psychoanalysis, because every time you're acquiring a work, you've got to ask yourself, why do I want to acquire that work? Why am I moved by this work in many ways? Because you have, now I could become kind of a counselor of collector at the time not money anymore in finance, which could happen soon. The first lesson I would say to a collector is try not to collect yourself. Because I know some collectors that are only buying black and white. I mean, why black and white? And where is it getting you? I mean, you should try. And the most interesting experience I had in acquiring art, and that's why I keep acquiring art, because it's a challenge, is to acquire something you don't like. And that's why I'm referring to some of my mentor, and I'm here in Belgium, and I should refer to Herman Dalet, who started collecting in the 60s and 70s, and he said his rule was to collect things he didn't understand, which why he bought Marcel Brotas, who I still don't understand myself, so it's pretty normal. But many works that you don't understand, and also works that you don't consider work of art. This is why, for example, I am collecting digital art quite a lot for 15 years. And so I'm giving a talk afterwards, so it's a teaser for the one that would like to stay, about digital arts. But it's really, I really remember that the first time I bought a digital work of art, I came back home with a computer with the software uploaded on the thing. So it was funny because I carried it through the plane and I just paid the VAT on the value of the computer because it's not looking like a work of art, obviously. So that's the interesting challenge, and more, yes, I collect work that are linked to practice. I'm not sure about performances and those kind of things. I still have to receive performances that are moving me a lot from that point of view. But to say about acquiring work of arts, I finish with answering your question eventually, is to say that for me, the most interesting thing is to put together the collection. I said, and you heard that yesterday, that I think that every work of art is a word, and the curator or the collector is creating a sentence. Because, I don't know, dressing can mean very different things in different contexts. Dressing can be dressing up an explanation about why you came late at night. or it can be dressing of your salads. And it's the same with a work of art. It can mean things in very different contexts. So I'm really interested in this. I'm also very curious about the evolution of humans. So I find works today that are still surprising me. So it's true that my problem is, of course, storage, and that's a massive problem for everyone.
But before we get on to storage.
Storage and conservation is really a massive problem for us, for me, and I'm sure for all of us. But that would be maybe the physical limits I would have.
So does that ring true for you as well, Dorith?
Yes, I would like to say about the psychology of the collectors. Really, there are so much different way of collecting and different collectors. The collectors who collect black and white, maybe his mind is binaire, I don't know in English, but binaire, black and white. It's a reflect of the personality, I think. And there are some collectors who will actually who will collect with the market to make investment. It's a way. It's okay. And there are so much other ways to collect. I know a collector in France, very big collector, who said the dark aspect of my personality, I prefer to see it in my walls than inside me. And really, it's a very good. He has a big foundation in France. And there are so much ways to collect. It's very personal.
And what is it for you, do you think? Do you have a sense of what the drive is or what the psychology that you're playing out is?
About the collectors or my collection?
Personally.
Come and visit.
Sorry?
Come and visit the collection.
Come and visit the collection. I think when we begin to collect, we didn't have a special object. We were young, 30 years old, and maybe time after time we understand there is a thread in our collection, and I think really our research is about the construction of the identity. We have a part of the collection about fiction and reality with Philippe Thomas, with in 90 with collection Yunja Paul de Vautour about the place of the collector and the artist, the name of the collector, the regard of the collector. And year after year, maybe my profession, I don't know, influence me, but I am looking more and more with, it was more conceptual at the beginning, and now I am, comment on dit, travailler par. I am more touched about the thing about the body and the feeling, the emotion, and it's a challenge inside me, and that's what it interesting in collecting art. It's this challenge, not to buy things really easy to look in my wall. More and more, at the beginning we collect and we put on our walls a lot of works. And more, I put few works because we discuss with every work in the wall during a time, 6 months, and after we change. But we have less and less works on our walls because they are now like an individu. I don't know in English. An individu. Maybe as a psychoanalyst, I will discuss with him some months, and after I will have another patient. But it's really important for me to have to be, comment tu as dit encore, être travaillé, je sais pas si- to be touched by one artwork. It's a word. Each artwork can be a word for me.
So that idea of intimacy, in fact, doesn't just run through those relationships with artists as personal relationships, but actually it's about a kind of ongoing relationship with a particular work of art.
Yes.
And that's in your home, and that's something that you kind
Yes.
of interact with every day in that sense, and there's a kind of ongoing dialogue or conversation
Yes.
with the object as well as with the...
With the object and with the artist. It happens when I met a work in a fair or in a gallery, and the artist is there, or immediately or a few months after when I met again the artist. It happens, I told him, I'm really sorry, I made a lot of projection on your work. And sometimes the artists say, yes, I am interested. And I said, it's very subjective. Collect, for me, it's a very subjective position. And I assume this, I don't want to be objective. I am a subject. We are living in a world, we are considered like objects. It's a real problem. So we have to fight to be a subject, not an object.
It reminds me an article I read for the first time, the first exhibition of Pinot in the Palazzo Grassi. Jackie Wolfschlager in the Financial Times wrote, whether you like it or not, it's interesting to see Mr. Pinot's vision of the world. And it's just one vision, like you could read it in a book or read it in a documentary or something. It's a personal vision. Dorith spoke about one word. If you put a word, you have a sentence, and it's you agree with the sentence or not in some ways.
Do you have any sense of what that overall picture looks like then? I mean, if you describe something as a vision, then in some respects you might be trying to fulfill a vision of something, i.e. complete a picture or complete, a paragraph or a chapter or a novel, or is it something that actually you're just, in that sense, going from one thing to the next, and it's only... it's not that there's a place that you're trying to get to or a story that you're trying to finish.
One of my founding sentences that I saw first time when I was maybe 14 years old was Socrates, who said, there's only one thing I know, is I don't know. So I think that's about art, is that it's never finished. And when you say there's a final element, and that's why, we're doing the rehanging of the collection every year, and every year we rediscover it. So it's never finished and it never fixed. And I think that's what the world is. And the world becomes only dangerous when people think that things are fixed. We had a big debate here in Belgium recently because the fact that the northern part of the country was against killing animals without making them unconscious. It seems ridiculous. It seems very good sense, but except that the Jews and the Muslims, for being kasher or kosher, they need to kill them when they're alive. So there was a debate about it here with representative of both communities, and eventually they said, okay, but these books have been written 2,000 years ago, and we were not aware of the suffering of the animals at the time. So why don't we adapt to what the current world is, and rather than holding those traditions? So I think art is one way of keeping us that the world is moving and moving very fast. Ideas are going through very fast as well. So I think the key thing to remember for a collection to be something which is changing.
Pedro, maybe you might jump in here and say something a little bit, because we were talking earlier on about, in particular, your interest in conceptual practices, but also thinking about how maybe to specifically be collecting more female artists, and that trying to sort of slightly redress a balance and think about the ways in which that history has been told and how through a collection you might articulate a different type of narrative.
Well, honestly, What happened is that we realized a couple of years ago that the collection has like 2/3 of men and 1/3 of women, which I think is a pretty good ratio, taking, in comparison museums and, museums that we can compare, right? The information is kind of public. But honestly, I don't care to this anymore. I said I really want to quit this art thing, basically because no one discuss aesthetics, no one discuss philosophy of the art, of the production. So it's a very shallow discussion. So I rather be more going into studying or the intellectual side of the thing. So that's my challenge. So regarding things at home, the day that I'll be there at home with a white cube with no art, I think then I achieved my objective. So my challenge now is the potentiality of not being, because the potentiality of being is easy. We are all eager and we want to be. So I want not to be. So this is the goal. That's what art is for me.
Are there any questions?
There's one question. Yes.
When you have an artwork that you like, how do you, before buying it, how do you approach it? Do you approach it on a standalone basis, or do you think about the existing collection or the future of the collection? And when, Alain, you said to challenge as collector, does that mean that you approach it on a standalone basis? I just want to hear your views on that from all of you.
I do it alone with, we're exchanging ideas with Eva, my girlfriend, every time. We very often don't say anything before saying, do you like this work? And we say we like it both. So, but it's always a thinking. Again, it's you try to resist to the work of art. You challenge the work. You say, because of course you need to make a decision, but you don't know the work of art yet, because you haven't lived with it. So you need to try to imagine what it will be to live with it. Yes, of course, so it needs to be challenging. One of the questions I really ask myself for many, many, many years, like for probably 15 years, I'm asking me that question, is do I stand a chance that someone will want to look at this work in 30 years' time? And go around Brussels. No one from Brussels, okay. Go around at Brussels and ask yourself the question, and you will say, it helps you really not to buy many things. So, what is really something that is opening up your mind, asking you a question, disturbing you in one way or another? That's one key question I'm asking myself. Then, of course, there are things that are interesting me, but I will not get in details on that field. But there are some lines of power around the collection that are of interest, and it's better that you visit. It's open until tomorrow, if you want. Yeah, I think that's always an effort of challenging it, rather than saying, oh, I like it, I buy it. No, it's certainly not to do that. You need to challenge. Sometimes I used to, for example, take a photo of the work, and I was putting it again on a wall, not where it would be, because I never acquire work thinking it will be in the bathroom, in the kitchen, in the whatever, never, ever. But sometimes I want to live with it, so I leave a photograph of it somewhere in the house, and I pass in front of it, I look at it, and if after 2 days I don't look at it anymore, then too bad, it's not making the cut. So it's a really challenge continuously to say, okay, how am I going to live with it? How is it going to be? But it's always a personal, family kind of a discussion. And it will be interesting to know, how do you feel with having an outside curator? how does it work, the relationship? He's bringing you work, or you asking him when you see something, or he's the hunter and he's bringing back the prey to you and you decide, or what do you do? How do you do it? How do you do it? How does it work, that relationship with a curator?
He's an extremely good friend. So we talk, I don't know, at least 5 times per day. I talk more to him than I talk to my wife. So I could say that, no, we are in the point that we want to discuss philosophy. We don't want to discuss buying anything. I guess we are done. So that's it. No, and I don't care anymore. That's the thing. So, you know, my issue is to come to an art fair like this saying that I don't care. Okay, this is my statement. Is do exactly what to subvert the system. So saying that, thank you for having me here. You know, I really appreciate, but you know, I'm really not part of this system anymore.
But then why are you here?
Exactly, to tell that I'm not part of the system. Because if I weren't here, okay, I
There'd be
wouldn't
nobody
be
to say
saying
that
that.
you weren't here.
Yeah. You know, like why I'm at MoMA. I am there, okay? Why? Because I go over all the works that are submitted to MoMA in the Latin American thing. And I know all the artists. And you know, 2 days before, if I have an issue, I ask them. Okay? So I'm the only one that makes this. I'm the only one that votes no. I have the right? So I'm there to express myself. So therefore, if I think that everything, you know, is well discussed with me, so there is a reason that I vote no. It's not that I don't want to be against. Many times I vote yes. But you know, it's a reflection. So this kind of, if I'm not a MoMA, I don't understand how MoMA works. So I have to understand how, you know, the major museum in the world works if I want to subvert the system somehow at one day. And it's easy to be present at MoMA and bring ideas, and no, different ideas that they are not looking at. For example, disclosing information and conflict of interests. I have a lot of information from MoMA, you know, a lot. But no museums in this whole planet have a code of conduct for disclosure conflict of interests. And I'm not going to be a collector that has an advantage, you know, that others don't have. So I rather get out of this because I think that this is a dirty thing. Okay? So my thing is to go there and say, listen, I have this work in the collection. Is a copy of the video. Okay? I just want to make you aware. So this I do before the purchase. And because there is no conduct in any museum, say, okay, it's approved. But my goal is to, what? To try to build up a new kind of ethics in museums, okay? So if I'm gonna achieve or I'm not gonna achieve, I don't care. But I have the right to speak out my mind. So.
One day a rebel, always a rebel. Can we discuss that with Dorith, maybe? And about
Yeah, of course, I'm a rebel. I have always been a rebel, and I'll always be a rebel. If you are for this, I'm against.
Okay.
Thank you for your insight.
So, by the way,
Yep.
discussions at MoMA are free, okay? That's the thing. I can say whatever I want to say in the meeting. No censor whatsoever till today. Good to make this point. It's an amazing institution, by the way.
Thank you. That's what I was going to ask. No, I'm joking. But in terms of the subjective point of view that you mentioned towards the works, and Alain's idea of living with the works, and your concept of not being, or not being anymore, I'm wondering if you can comment on the legacy of the collection, the legacy of the works of artists that you have in, let's say, 50 years, 60 years, when, you know, things change and get passed on, or possibly get passed on, or placed, if you can comment on that.
What's placed?
Well, whatever decision that you're thinking about in terms of, in your particular case, not being, how does that kind of formalize? How does that happen?
Well, I'm in the process of not being, okay? The idea is that every time that I'm in a comfort zone, I try to challenge myself for another level of comfort zone, okay? Regarding what will happen to the collection, I have no clue, and I don't want to know. The collection is a part of my timeline, of my life. It started here, it's finishing here. There is a whole narrative that I lived during that thing. And very likely there is a whole narrative of what I lived before the collection. All right? So once I stop collecting, of course, I'm addicted. I'm going to start doing something else. And very likely will be into ephemera, into books that I already have 3,000 pieces of conceptual art in ephemera and books. So probably I'm going to go and have 1 billion of that thing, you know. I don't know. But the idea is to have material that will give chance for people to go and research. And what this will happen, where this is going to be, I have no clue. The goal is to learn. The goal is to question. The goal is to challenge.
Pedro says timeline. I totally agree. I really like that idea. For example, if you compare the difference between a collector's collection and a museum collection, I think somewhere I read somewhere that a private collector's collection is a time frame, is a certain time period. It's 20 years, and it's a little bit the history of art during that time in many ways. When the museum tries to be, you know, comprehensive about one certain period of time, that's one thing. So I think that timeline is important. So in the case of the collection, I am aware that I'm right now using my children's money for my addiction. So when I'm going to be dead, they're going to do with it whatever they want because it's their money. So I think it's important what they will decide with it. For me, as far as I'm concerned, I don't care either, in the sense that I don't want, it's not part of my legacy, it's not something I certainly don't want to build a private museum, that's out of the question. But it's about, I'm a kind of a custodian, I'm holding it right now, and I'm trying to preserve it, which is always problematic. And then it will go somewhere else. Under what form? Whether it's going to be given to museums or part of something, I don't know. And what will be left over for me is, first of all, the experience I have, like Pedro described. It's a fantastic experience. I mean, Eva and I, we've been visiting countries. I mean, I can really say that I visited the world. The first time I went to Venice was for the Biennale. The first time I went to that crazy city in the middle of the woods in Germany, which is named Kassel, was because of the documenta. You know, the first time I was invited by the Mako Art Fair, I thought that I was surprised there was art in Mexico. I thought it was all about sombrero and stuff like that. Brazil brought me there. I mean, Hong Kong, Korea, Singapore, I mean, the rest of the world. Those experiences, those are ours, and they will stay. I'm trying to make the documentation of the collection a little bit better, because this hanging we do every year, before it was gone. But this meant something. Once we did a hanging of all the non-Western world, all the art that was not from America or Europe. This time we do a fantastic hanging I want to keep. So we will keep it, and maybe it will be a study of the brain of Mr. Servais one day, maybe. I don't know. That's the best that can happen about that collection. And maybe the brain will be in a pot just nearby, so they'll be seeing what the result was. But I don't care. I mean, it's a life now. It's going to go afterwards, and my children will decide.
Dorith?
My children will not decide.
Why not? Why not?
First, I'm 100% against inheritance. Okay? I made my money. My parents were high school teacher. I create my wealth. I give my children everything they need to be successful. So they go and they make it. If they fail, it's their choice. Life is about optionality. It's a chance, and that's what conceptual art is about. Look at all that. Lawrence Wiener has so many works that you have a dice.
And that's how you've brought up your children.
Well, I already, I'm giving them the chance they need. But there is a conundrum in this thing, which is, if I donate the work for a museum, I'm donating my name, I'm perpetuating my name. And I want not to be. Okay? So this conundrum has to be solved in the next, I don't know, few years. I don't know, maybe tomorrow the train crashes and it's not solved. But, this is an important issue for me. It's to leave no legacy.
Are they aware?
Of course they are. I play
They are
hardball
now.
with them. They go to school, they study. If they don't study, their choice. What can I do?
You cut the card.
No.
I know you're not. I love this man, I must say it. He's fantastic. I don't know whether I can count him as a friend, but listening to him is such a pleasure. And that this is art, I'm sorry. Sometimes, and that's why I say collectors and artists. I wrote sometimes that collectors and artists are two sides of the same coin. Of course, not the art buyers. Maybe it's the people that are making this but it's fascinating. And again, speak to people like him because it's a work of art and it's free.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, because you actually answered part of my question, but it's interesting to see how some collectors just collect as a way of getting to know themselves as an intimate process, and some others become to a level to be socially concerned and to try to give a message. Their message, I like, because you both are very direct and controversial for many people, and this makes you think. So in a way, you are creating sentences, like Alain always says, no? Through art, you are creating your own book, and you are creating the message. So my question is, first of all, you think this addiction will ever end in your life? Like you are planning to kind of quit this addiction? And the second is, what is the best and the worst that the art brought in your life?
The best and the worst are, how do I say? Go yourself. Let me think about it.
Okay. Could you repeat the beginning of
I
the
know.
question?
Best and the worst are
The
metaphors.
best. No.
I don't care. They are
C'est
metaphors.
ça.
No
Yes,
answer for this.
Yes, I think it can stop. I think we made the experience to stop. It was the life, but we made this experience, and it began again. I am used to say, because the passion is more important than l'adversité.
Adversity.
Than adversity for us. Yes. And sure, it can stop. We speak about passion. There are people who are passionate with golf, with sport, with food, with I don't know, so much things. They can stop. Sometimes it's very difficult to stop with the addiction, but it's possible. But for me to collect, my way of collecting can stop, because how I can explain? When you feel something with an artwork. It's like you make a walk in the nature, and you feel a lot of things, or you read a book who inspire you a lot of thinking. You can stop at a moment, but something continue inside you. So you can stop, collect, or work, or an artist, or collect at all, but you were nourished by something, and inside you it continues. So maybe to buy another work, it's like when you appreciate a work of one artist. Maybe if you are addict, it happens to me for young artists, I think. I want to buy all the works of this artist because in every work she said something important. But you can stop and don't buy every work of this artist because something is nourished inside you, and you can stop and be nourished for a long time with these ideas, with this thinking and feelings also. And the worst...
What's your worst experience? Yeah.
Sorry?
No.
And the worst, the best and the worst, the big problem is the stockage. I think it's a big storage. I have a friend, French collector friend, who will organize in a few weeks, because he has a lot of humor. He will organize debates about poor collector. The theme is poor collector. All the difficult things, the works we lose, we don't remember where is it, in the gallery, in the storage, in a friend, and the reparation, and everything. It's a big problem, the storage. So there was a collector here. They are not there. They collect now immaterial artworks, and they said for the storage it's perfect. We have no storage problem now. With performance, they buy videos, and it's very good.
As I said, the good and bad is a metaphor. I have only good experiences, let's say. This is fun. This is joy. And that's what I'm up to. Regarding storage, well, you can buy Mario Garcia Torres. Some of the works do not exist. So it's easy. And there are many like this.
About finishing, I think it's something quite important because I've been 20 years in that thing, and I've seen a lot of people that I know that stopped collecting, a lot. And I think that there is something like a cycle of 12 years. I always, people speak about relationships 7 years and stuff, and I think collecting 12 years is a challenge. And it makes sense because if you look at history, if you understand what I said earlier, I think that the interesting thing is to try to be connected with the world as it is right now and with the art as it is right now. But art is changing very fast. If you look back, and I really love history because I learned from history about today. And when you look at art history, in 1950 you had to collect Pollock. In 1960 you had to collect, what did you collect in 60s? The things, conceptual art.
I was born.
Conceptual art. In the 70s you had to collect pop art. And then minimalism, and I mean, who the hell is the human that can go from one to the other, move from one to the other? I remember I love to go to big exhibition like Gertrude Stein, for example. I saw an exhibition of Gertrude Stein, and it's funny because she missed the movement of Picasso to Cubism. She said, "Come on, fucking Pablo, stop doing this horrible thing. It was looking like nothing." I would rather go with Juan Gris who kept doing cubism for many, many years. And that's the key thing, is who's strong enough to move from a Pollock to a minimalist, or from a Pollock and a Marilyn from Warhol in 10 years. So this is the perfect collection in some way. So, and what I'm sorry sometimes for some people is that they keep collecting stuff they were collecting from the 1990s. And that's a nightmare. So I'm asking you, Evita, as you know, if I get Alzheimer or I get very bad, shoot me. And if I start doing stupid thing in the collecting, please, all of you, state, rather give your money to the poor people, because what you're now buying is really nonsense, past. So I think there's an end to it. And it's a permanent re-exercise to challenge yourself. And that's when you're asking me what is the good moment and the bad moment, is the constant challenge. It keeps me awake every day, and I think it keeps me young. And it keeps many people young, because, we are all kind of second age, supposedly. So some of us are just, watching television on Saturday afternoon normally. So we're still traveling, walking, going to places, and so on. And I really remember I saw an amazing collector. Gave a lot of works to the Guggenheim, and she died. She was 84 years old. I mean, she was like a mummy in terms of the mummy, not a mummy, a mummy in the face. But you could talk to her, and it's amazing. I mean, she was talking about young artists 30 years old. So I said there are two ways to become eternal. Is first of all to become nothing, as you realize, and to disappear. Another way is to keep going, and I think two ways is being a teacher, because I believe that being a teacher, staying with the young people all the time, keeps you very young. And I think maybe collecting is a way to eternal life, hopefully.
I think also you might be able to there's something about using the phrase an addiction that feels quite kind of obviously like negative in that sense, whereas actually if you re-described that as a practice, as something that through the course of time you can get better at and can develop with you, and so it's not that there comes a point where you're fit so you can just stop running, and it's like actually you have to carry on doing that the whole time, and the more you run, the more you understand what running is about, and so on and so forth, and you might be able to eventually kind of, I don't know, like run a marathon, but that it's not that once you've done that, well, you're stopping. You've reached a point. Actually, it's the practice that is the process and the ongoing relationship with a set of ideas and concerns that is what allows you to understand more and more and more, and to keep kind of being interested in it.
But it's an addiction, because we saw it 2 days ago with Eva. We started early. I don't remember what we did in the morning, and when we came to this fair, we did it all in one day. And when we finished at 7, we were exhausted, and we said, would we go to Proposition, which is another art fair? And then we went, and we finished at 10, and I said to someone, can you please take an Instagram of us, because we started at 10 and we finished at 10. Why do we do this? And we're sometimes wondering, I mean, are we sadomasochistic or something, or is it never ending? It's a kind of an addiction, I think. But it's an addiction. It's an addiction.
Have we got time for another question, or are we?
One.
One.
From an artist, so let's see what an artist got to say here.
Yeah, just a little question concerning addiction. First, just to say something, I've asked a few collectors that they think it's an addiction, and their wives and husbands think it's an addiction. But another thing for a collector, this is just for anyone who likes to answer, how does it feel responsible to shape a process and artist's career, different artist's career? How do you find yourself responsible in terms of influencing what comes next? Because I felt very influenced by collectors I've known with my work. Do you feel that responsibility, and do you feel the immediate result, or is it very indirect and very subtle?
You should be responsible for yourself.
Obviously I am, yeah.
Okay, good for you. So keep being responsible yourself. I have nothing to do with that.
Sorry, nothing?
I have nothing to do with your responsibility.
Yes.
It's yourself.
I'm not talking about the artist's responsibility,
No,
generally.
I have
even
no
as an
responsibility
artist.
about your work too.
Sorry?
I have no responsibility with you and your work. If you're not responsible, you're making a decision. So you
That wasn't
are
my
gonna
question,
face.
though. Yes, that wasn't my question.
I think
Hold on, let me rephrase the question slightly. And this is probably not your question, but it now becomes mine, just to kind of respond to Pedro. Not the responsibility, but the opportunities that you do create for artists. Like all of you, run residency spaces or support young artists for residencies or for production. Like that kind of support, which is not, you're not taking a responsibility, but you're providing that opportunity kind of for them. And is that what you kind of mean? No.
Influence, intellectual influence, and direction rather than, I'm not talking about financial support of collectors.
I'm
I'm
not
talking completely
talking about
different. Yeah. Alain, I think
no, but
understand my
no,
question.
I agree totally with
Yeah.
Pedro. I have no responsibility. I had a very lovely conversation with an artist yesterday on a terrace about new direction of his art. It is an exchange, but I would have it about cooking or sexual positions, whatever you want to have. So I can help you maybe there as well. And what I mean by this, that it's your responsibility, it's your evolution. I said it, I don't want to get involved. Of course, if I can help you, if I can tell you, okay, yes, I can introduce you to this curator maybe. Of course I would do it, but no, it's really, and I said to this artist yesterday, how to become a better artist, just get your guts out the most you are. If they are good guts, then you're going to have a future as an artist. If they are bad guts, nothing will help
Can
you.
you rephrase your question?
I think yes.
Try to rephrase it.
I was talking about completely from art historic, educational, intellectual direction. In fact, for example, I had a very important curator, collector, about 6 years ago who mentioned one comment about one of my paintings, and that changed the course of what I was doing. That's exactly the kind of thing I mean. Of course, artists have responsibility, a
Okay,
massive.
but this is my paresia. Paresia, it's my own truth. So if you want to use my truth, okay, it's fine, all right? But responsibility, I cannot have the same thing. I can hear anything from you, and I will take the good things that interest me, things that interest me, and the ones that don't interest me, that's it. So it's a two-way relationship, okay? In this sense, we can sit down and talk. There's no big deal on that.
And you spoke about art history. I think that none of us had art history. Did you ever study art history?
No, I know physics.
Did you ever study art history?
Yes.
Okay, I'd never.
Study art history? Oui, un petit peu.
So
Little, yes.
she's the only smart one.
Yes, I am.
But is part of the question that
No,
you're creating it?
I am okay.
That's something else.
I am okay with Pedro. It's not our responsibility. Our responsibility is to be a human being who will exchange with another human being. And after, if you are interested about something, we think, and you develop it personally, it's your responsibility. It's really just an exchange between two human beings. It's like a psychoanalyst. We don't have the responsibility of your life, but we have the responsibility to be a human being in front of you and to be there. You understand?
I think
Okay.
that might be the
Yeah,
perfect
exactly.
moment
It's
to
the
That's
finish.
perfect.
same. It's
Dorith,
the same during
I'm going to take the
collector.
responsibility to actually kind of wind down the conversation here. Of course, the panelists will be milling about for more conversation with you on the one-to-one if you'd like it. I think that's actually a great note in a way to kind of end kind of with that question, and what it provoked from the panel was this idea around exchange between artists and collectors, and bringing it back full circle to what we're doing at Delfina Foundation. And for the point of this conversation here today is looking at kind of collecting as practice and the mutuality of obsessions and also practice or addictions between artists and collectors. So anyway, thank you all very much for joining us for today's panel
Let
and
me
for your
make
contribution.
only
Yes,
a last point.
before he disappears.
Do not ever agree with me. By the time you agree with me, I might have changed my position.
And second thing, don't move. There's a very interesting panel just
That's
after
true,
this.
yes, on new technologies.